I'd like to preface this with something. About 6 months ago, my pilot from World War II and the two gunners, myself and a guy by the name of Dance, got together in Washington and we talked about World War II. There was not one single point that we could agree upon. So, going into a discussion like this, you have to realize that it's half mythologized now. It's been embellished in your own head so that you can't really differentiate the difference between what actually happened and the way it exists now in your own mind. So, dangerous stuff we're playing with here. This is my memory of it. I would guess 18 months or so before the picture actually was cast and began shooting, a fellow by the name of Goldman came to Tucson, Arizona, where I was shooting a film, and we talked there about this script for 6 or 7 evenings over dinner. And then he disappeared, and I never heard anything from him. And then I got a call from Steve McQueen. And he said, "Can you come over to my house? I got the flu." And I said, "Sure." And he said, "There's this script I'd like you to read." And there it was, Butch Cassidy. And I said, "That's funny, I've seen this script." In fact, I remember working on it. And so I took it home and read it, and of course it was wonderful. And I called McQueen up and I said, "How much are they asking for it?" And he said, $350,000. I said, "You put in $200,000 and I'll put in $200,000 and we'll buy it this afternoon." And he said, "I can't do that." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, there's this guy that's involved and he's an agent and he would have to leave his job, and he won't leave his job until he knows that he will be the producer." I said, "Fine." That was a Thursday or Friday. Well, it was sold over the weekend to neither one of us. And so strangely enough, for some reason, that left McQueen out. And of course, I was always thought I would play Sundance. And then George got involved. And he said, no, I thought you always wanted to play Butch." And then another important ingredient, and George will dispute this, and probably has evidence, but it was in my memory that Joanne was the one that suggested Redford for the part originally. But that's what I say. No one knows anymore. But I certainly do remember George's firm, unerring eye on the whole proceedings. He is truly a director in the best sense. When you're cooking, he leaves you alone. When you get in trouble, which is where most directors falter, when you get in trouble, he's the guy that comes in and points you in the right direction. And that, believe me, is very unusual. We had 2 weeks of rehearsal, and I think they went very well. And on the first day of shooting, we shot the railroad car scene. And George says, "Something has happened between rehearsal and shooting, and what you're doing now is not what you were doing when we came here." I said, "What is that, George?" And I remember him saying, "You're trying to be funny, and you weren't doing that in rehearsal." So that shows you what happens when you get in front of a camera. That film was all there, and the work that had to be done on it, the improvements that the actors and the personalities and their abilities brought to it, was negligible. We didn't have to change much. There were no lines, no scenes that didn't work. I think George had done all of that before we got in front of the camera. And so you don't take as much credit for that, or at least I don't. you might pat yourself more on the back if you'd taken something that was really bad and made it almost good, simply because you started with less and you had to invent more. That film would have been, with different actors in it, probably could have been pretty much the same film, so long as George had been at the helm of it. For a thing like that to work, you really need two charitable actors. Actors who have enough sense to give the other one the stage when it's the other person's turn. I think other good actors would have found maybe a little different chemistry, but that would have worked as well too. Because George would have found a way to use that chemistry, whatever it was, to the benefit of the film. George had hired a stuntman who came down 2 weeks before we started to shoot. He gave him the bicycle and he said, invent something. The guy came on the day of the shooting and he couldn't do anything. And of course, George is not extravagant. George is frugal. But he was really pissed that this guy had wasted a 2-week stunt thing. And finally, I did all of it, and Connie Hall did one of the shots in it. So we had a terrific time. Except for when George's back went out on him. I came around a corner, and there was George trying to claw his way up the side of a ledge. I said, what the hell are you doing? He said, my back, it's out. I gotta get I gotta hang. I said, hang? And he was trying to get a finger hold on some things so he could take the weight off of his feet. He said, get me over to the tree. And so I turned him around and I got him, and I had my face right into his belly and carried him over to the tree, and he hung. He said, hang from my waist and put some weight on it. And these guys in the crew kept walking by and saying, boy, I wonder what that's all about. There's no saying lying around someplace. Nostalgia ain't what it used to be, but it is. And I'm nostalgic for those days when people shot films. They made films. Now they shoot budgets, they shoot schedules, they shoot somebody's bonus, they shoot a release date. But that film was shot, and that's maybe one of the reasons why it worked. I mean, even to the point where there was a lot of pressure at the end for George to hurry up the distribution, because some southern distributor said that if he got the film earlier, that he could get $1.1 million out of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arizona. But George was living up over in somebody's dressing room so that he wouldn't waste the 20 minutes driving back and forth to work. I mean, he was in the cutting room 12 and 13 and 14 hours a day, and they wanted to release it at 90% of its potential to make a date. And I must say, Zanuck was dragged kicking and screaming, but he finally created an umbrella under which George could hide and not get diverted. I think that carries over time somehow. I suspect it has something to do with delight, the delight of the filmmakers while they were making it. And that's what the film is really about, is delight. All the ingredients have to work. The script has to work, the actors obviously have to work. The camaraderie of it has to be contagious. We had a terrific time.